Hey there team, welcome back to the channel, welcome to my overview of Dynasty Warriors Origins. So, if you're not across it, we're pivoting format on the channel just to get this out of the way. Previously when we look at overviews, it was just the first 2 hours of a game, just very surface level stuff. Now it's more review-esque. I'll play a game for 18 hours, and if I haven't seen the credits roll at that time, I'll just call it an overview and post there. So that's what's happened here. I've played this for 18 hours. I must be close to the end. It's difficult to tell because I'm not familiar with the Three Kingdoms, and who knows, there could be another whole saga after it. But mix that in with the fact that I've had to pick one of 3 factions to align with, and I've missed a little bit of content because of that decision. There's definitely more than 18 hours content here. But for all intents and purposes, this is a review. I've covered it enough to be able to formulate an opinion, and I really like it. This is great fun. You also check, I'm putting a score on thumbnails. The plan is to put 100 games out a year under this format. And at the moment, we're still filling out the list. Stick with me, it will bear fruit. But the 98% that I'm giving this at the moment ultimately just says that it stands below Sin Duality, which might be a hot take, but I just really enjoyed that game and felt it to be very, very original, and nothing really wrong with this game. In fact, the biggest thing I can say about this is if you aren't into Dynasty Warriors or Muso games, or like my background is, I've tried them over the years and I've bounced off them. For whatever reason, they just never got me. This one did. So that in and of itself, I think, is a huge achievement. So maybe you've never given this genre a go, or you don't necessarily love the genre. This might actually be the one worth jumping on. That's the biggest victory for this one. So having said that, I can't really speak beyond the scope of this game. If you're looking for comparisons from an expert series veteran between this and, I don't know, bloody 7 or something like that, I have no idea. And I have questions myself that we'll probably answer if I cover more Dynasty Warrior games in the future, like, do they just keep doing the exact same story every time? There's like a dozen of these games out, and have they just, is it like a soft reboot? I'm not sure, right? But all I can really tell you is what's happening here. Dynasty Warriors Origins follows the Three Kingdoms saga, the romance of the Three Kingdoms, which again, very foreign for me, but with the help of this game, I've actually learnt quite a bit about it, and I've really enjoyed the story of the saga. I'm not necessarily saying that the storytelling is the strong part, but it's kind of like, when you draw from solid source material, it's kind of hard to stuff it up. If you're looking for like a Hollywood adaptation that's very character driven and high drama, that's not what this is. Rather, this is a fairly dry recollection of what is ultimately a classical saga with lots of characters and battles, and it's more like if you were watching a History Channel thing talking about it. And look, we'll stay with story since that's sort of where I've gone straight into it. In this game, and I think it might be unique to this game, you're playing kind of a nameless nobody character. The default name's Wanderer. I just went with that. Part of some order of Guardians of Peace. Now look, I don't know if this is part of Chinese mythology or whatever. They look a lot like Assassin's Creed people. And that's the absolute weakest part of this game, is when they sort of try and develop your character off to the side. It's very nothing. He's lost his memories, he doesn't really know, but essentially you are a window for the audience to experience the story through. So like as a sort of narrative mechanic, it's done exceptionally well because it helps teach someone like me that knows nothing about the Three Kingdoms, well, everything about it. But as far as, you know, actual character or whatever, no, he's a nothing silent protagonist, plank of wood. And they could have done away with trying to develop, you know, fill out his memories. He's got some people from his order as well. It doesn't matter. You can skip all that. But ultimately, and if you're like me, if you're Western and you don't really know much about Three Kingdoms, it is a humongous saga, right? It would be like me trying to summarize Lord of the Rings to you, which, you know, is multiple books over a long timeline, except this seems to have much more of a focus on, you know, the battles, the general level kind of stuff. So it's a little bit more tail end of Lord of the Rings, but longer. So I guess you could use Game of Thrones if you want a contemporary sort of touchstone. And who knows, the actual Three Kingdoms saga itself might be different and more nuanced outside of a video game where you kill hundreds of dudes in an army level brawl. But through the lens presented here, it's just focusing on the broad strokes battles. So there's a lot of characters. And again, being Western, a lot of their names kind of blur into the same thing. Sorry, but that's just how it is. Some of them stand out over time, and I got quite attached to all the different dudes. What's really interesting is the characters themselves are not one-dimensional, but they're more of a vehicle for ideological, philosophical discussion. At least that's how it seems to be here. An example being is there's one of the main character, Liu Bei, who's kind of a bit of a purity of heart, help the weak, that sort of thing. He has this kind of rigidity and almost like deontological morality. Be a good person no matter what. And so he's at odds quite often with one of the other big generals, Cao Cao, who is sort of the opposite end, right? He's kind of consequentialism, reason-based. Everything is means to an end. So those two clashing because they're kind of at odds ideologically. They're not necessarily enemies or dislike each other, but, examples, and I don't even know if you can go spoilers on something that's a bazillion years old like this, but Cao Cao, at a certain point, uses the death of his father, which looks like maybe an assassination, kind of as a casus belli, to just go and attack someone. Fairly cold, heartless, kind of cruel in a way, but through his perspective, he's capitalizing on something that's happened. He hasn't forced it to happen. I don't think he has that sort of treachery in him, but it is kind of heartless how he just capitalizes on that immediately. Here's another thought, and I know I'm doing sort of just Three Kingdoms review in a way, but I find it interesting. It's all new to me, but there is this kind of force of nature dude called Lu Bu, who is very representative, and there's a theme of the idea of beasts versus men, kind of, I get it, like a Chinese interpretation of those who choose to have rules, regulations, civility to live by, as opposed to that are just kind of doing whatever they want to do, dog with a bone. So this dude, Liu Bu, is kind of like Darth Vader in this universe. Like, he is absolutely the killing machine. You don't want to be against him, you kind of want him on your team, but again, he is kind of a dog chasing cars. He's almost psychopathic in his inability to play nice with other people because he just exists as like I said, as a force of nature. And so to tie in my other example, Liu Bei, who again, he seems like that golden child, ideologically kind of above a lot of people. I get it, like aligned with him. He ends up taking in Liu Bu because no one else will bloody take the dude, and the dude shows him nothing but absolute disdain and betrays him and everything like that. And in a way, it shows an example of the fallibility of that morality. Anyway, you have the Yellow Turban Rebellion, you have Dong Zhou, you have all this sort of stuff that I didn't know anything about, and I learnt about it from playing this game. So, as much as I've front-loaded with that kind of story, narrative construction, I think that's really worth noting. Again, I'm one of the few holdouts that still stands by Assassin's Creed. One of the strongest parts about it, even though you're not allowed to like Assassin's Creed anymore and you have to hate it, is the fact that they have so much history woven into it, and it can sort of stand as an educational tool to a point. I've learnt quite a lot, especially from Mirage recently, and they'll put, photographs of museum pieces and cool sort of little diary entries, and it's quite cool. If you're a young bloke that doesn't give a shit about history, I can understand that you're not interested, but as I get older, I find that sort of stuff more interesting. So this sits in that kind of pantheon for me, in that it has helped teach me so much about an interesting part of China's sort of cultural history. Now, mechanically, you've probably seen this before, but we'll still explain it at base levels. It's a Musou game. That's what the name of this genre is. It's unusual, you don't hear it a lot in the West, but that is these exaggerated, almost absurdist looking, I'm a superhero in a Chinese army killing a bazillion dudes, right? And part of, younger Scarlet bouncing off these sort of games, I suppose I was probably a bit more self-serious, and it was a little bit too ludicrous for me. Funnily enough, as you play more and more of this, and again, I don't know if it's unique to this game, but I don't really think it is, the fighting lots of enemies in the background is actually kind of a backdrop. You don't really waste a lot of your time. Like, they'll get caught up in your wild swings, but I find that you're fighting enemy generals a lot more. So let's lay down the structure of a battle. You have the two teams going at it, and they'll have name characters, and like I said, huge cast of characters. You'll have generic ones like Lu Bu, Brave General #1, that sort of stuff. But often, through the course of the saga, you're going to come up against and allied with all sorts of people from the cast of characters for perfectly reasonable reasons over the course of the story. everyone's swapping sides. The factions are teaming up and going against each other. So you'll often be up against recognizable names. But the point is that as the battle sort of moves around, you have the map that you can see, and you have these little sort of lieutenants, captains, I don't know what you want to call them, but they're like hero figures much like yourself. And they will be moving with blobs of units, and depending on the scenario, they'll launch counterattacks or special tactics, that sort of stuff, and some are more powerful than others. So it's not quite as robust as, say, like a Nemesis system from a Shadows of War or something like that, but at the same time, the volume is infinitely higher. And they're all kind of bashing into each other, clashing, killing each other, and essentially once one captain kills another, his army's going to take that space and push forward. They take bases, they stage from it. It sounds complicated, there is a complexity to it. It does have a limit. It is still all very scenario based. It would be cool to see what would happen if they drilled down into this system even deeper and, even made a sort of semi-persistent open world arena. I don't know, but it would probably exhaust you actually now that I think about it, because it is also very high intensity. But the point of sort of explaining that meta layer is your role in this as a bit of a super soldier, you kind of are more jacked than everyone else, is to ply your ability to put a finger on the scale and tip everything in your direction as best you see fit. So the battles are all going to be going on, and as the world goes on and as the game gets bigger, the battles will get bigger, and there will be lots and lots of different skirmishes at any given time. There'll be like 7 different fights on your screen, and you have to figure out where you're going to go and where you're going to sort of intervene and start shit with the enemy captain, and that's how it will work. So you'll jump on your horse, you'll thunder across the battlefield. You've got some little mini games to sprinting and cheering up your horse to recharge your sprint faster, and all that happens when you level it up. But you'll go and smash into a skirmish. Essentially, I've got the settings set for a soft lock onto heroes. I can't remember if that was the default, but essentially I'll zero in on whoever the enemy hero is. As the big battles all clash together, it'll become a mess. There'll be like 10 lieutenants on each side. And you do gotta be careful, you get overwhelmed. There'll be too many telegraphs for you to process. But you zero in and you kind of have a little bit of a skirmish duel with these dudes. Later on, you can actually call dudes out for a duel, where it sort of goes into a little arena fight between you and them, and everyone watches from the sidelines. It's okay, it's cool. It's kind of weaker, to be honest. It almost feels like a mechanic that's in there because maybe it's been in previous games, but it's okay. It's a cool gimmick, but I don't really see it standing apart super far from, just fighting them on the battlefield. And so from that, you've got like this bar. It's called bravery. It's kind of like mana or stamina, depending how you want to look at it. You attack dudes, you charge it up. Each pip can be exhausted to go into what's called battle arts, which you'll have in shortcuts, and that'll depend on the weapon that you're doing. So there's a whole lot of that. There's an equipment system. There's probably about 10 different weapon types. In the end, I found I got a lot of value from spears. One of its battle arts that were built in is the ability to sort of do a parry against attacks. You can do a parry if you can time your block correctly. You've got a block and a dodge, and I ended up unlocking a thing that made it so that if I dodged perfectly, I'd get a lot of bravery points back, so that was handy. So I went through a bit of a life cycle, trying out all the different weapons and finding my own method, but I generally just settled on the spear. But yeah, that's got like a parry, and then you've also got a kind of special move that the enemy can do, and the only way to parry that is with a special parry. So I essentially became a parry monster, just wailing on these dudes. So they have a health bar, they have little armor pips underneath it, and essentially over attacking them for a while, you'll wear down the armor, and that puts them into like a stagger state where you can do an all-out assault against them. And so a lot of the way the game plays out is that you ride around the battlefield, you go looking for a fight with a lieutenant, you get into your rhythm with them and watch their telegraphs and work around that and try and whittle them down, beat them, and then move on to the next dude. But honestly, it's addicting as anything. There are some really cool standout moments where, you'll build battering rams to knock down walls, or there'll be catapults firing and that sort of thing. The enemy will start using sort of maneuvers to send troopers at you, which are kind of, you can't ignore them in that case. They glow orange and they're very powerful and dangerous, and you in turn recruit a guard to your team that you can use those abilities against them as well. So there's all these little things. There's Muso attacks, rage attacks, where a ridiculous amount of damage can be done. You can kill like 1,000 dudes at once, and it's It's kind of cool. It's rare enough that it's fun, but it's a great way to sort of break the back of a fight that maybe you're not winning. Often you'll team up with a partner on the battlefield that you can choose at the beginning, and you can switch to them temporarily, which I think is a little bit more traditional Dynasty Warriors. I think maybe you play as the named characters more, but you can switch to them and go into bloody Muso mode and kill bazillions of dudes. But look, it's hectic, it's fun. The battlefield sounds of all the dudes like raw cheering, and you can get into big charged offensives, and it's cool. I can't think of a game off the top of my head that really gets the charging into the enemy battle line feeling, but this nails it really, really well. It's got like a great soundtrack, some pretty good, traditional, let's say, symphonic type numbers in the world map and outside of battle, but in battle it's all guitar shredding, and there is clearly a theme to the songs, and it gets really stuck in your head, and it's quite an earworm. Anyway, all of it works really well. It's such a great package. I had no performance issues whatsoever. So yeah, all in all, I think it's really good. So what are the takeaways? I think mechanically it keeps me involved. I think the storytelling is dry, but it's as good a way as you could deliver essentially a treatise on the saga that is the Three Kingdoms, or the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. So it's actually a really cool short course in a way to get a lot of info compounded in and jammed into your head. And I'm not going to say I'm an expert on this story now, but I certainly know a lot about it compared to when I knew nothing. But the gameplay is what holds it all together. The gameplay is really, really fun. There are some like side quests in the open world, talking to people. It's soft dialogue dating sim stuff. You'll get 2 dialogue choices and they both suck. Like, it doesn't really matter. It's just a conversation between the two. And the only thing that really keeps it from being kind of boring is often it is just the dude sprouting his unique take on morality and the state of the world, right? And you're just a backboard for them to scream against. And that's okay, that's fine, because again, like I said, it seems to be a bit of a philosophical think piece, giving you all these different ways of looking at the world for you to have a think about. Like even Dong Zhou, when you're talking to him in the early stages, he has this very, consumer mentality in an unusual sense, like literally the strong consume the weak, and he sees a circle of life through it. And while you might not necessarily agree, it is fairly sympathetic, and it explains at least how he sees the world. But again, that is dry, and it probably will wear you down, and I'm happy to be done with it for now, for sure. But you could go back and replay. There is a point where it does split into 3 distinct factions, and you kind of pick the one that you go with. So I'd be curious to go back and see how that's handled, because I went with Liu Bei. But even like Cao Cao and the 3rd faction, whatever they are, Sun Sea or something like that. I'm doing my best here. Anyway, look, I don't want to make this too long, but it's the nature of the beast. I just want to be thorough as well. So look, if you haven't played Dynasty Warriors before, or any Muso sort of game, but you find it interesting, this is the one to check out for sure. If you don't know much about Three Kingdoms and that sort of Chinese culture, but you're curious to learn about it in a kind of compressed time scale, this would be a great way to do it as well. If you're a fan of the series, look, it looks like it's reviewing well on Steam, but I can't tell you for what reasons, or, maybe the series lost the way and this Origins soft reboot has brought it back to grounding basics. I could not say. But having said all that, I really enjoyed my time with it, and it makes me curious, and when the next Dynasty Warriors comes out, I'll probably pick it up, or at least seriously consider looking at it because of the impression from this one. Anyway team, much as leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.